case to be examined by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. It's called pre-conviction diversion. It's the practice, I've been told, in Australia and in other countries. Therefore, I invite the Minister not to make a false start. As of now, either the alleged consumer goes to jail or pays the fine. It's a crime, Mr. Speaker, to send a young drug consumer to prison and be in the company of hardened criminals. Yes. Beware of the vicious circle which ensnares the restless, the innocent, the vulnerable groups, and the desperate consumer who are victims and risk of being a petty trafficker. The delayed action is an indictment of the regime on policy of dangerous drugs. But the regime has decided to catch up, even if implementation of the recommendation of the findings of the Commission of Inquiry is being done at snail's pace. The object is to break the vicious circle of drug trafficking. And I was amongst the first to say no to repressive measures, and by deleting the word offender and replaces it by user, certainly the right signal is being conveyed. At the time, those who were against my stand hailed from the rank and file of the MSM. Honorable Hariram was in a hurry to level unfair criticism then. I'm glad that he has made a U-turn. Who are the corruptors of the innocent victims? Big traffickers, wash, rinse, spin, dry their dirty laundering in laundromats like real estate, horse racing, betting places, and casino aided and abetted by corrupt regime. Am I to understand also the fun crowd who will sniff or smoke for recreational purposes at parties or within the perimeter of their four walls will not be disturbed? As we say, silence, it's potluck time. There is no provision in the legislation for this privileged category. And Mr. Speaker, more protection or guidance must be given to vulnerable groups. People who are poor, as in addition to consuming drugs for their personal use, they usually also commit other offenses, theft, assaults, and prostitution, and this may be considered to be aggravated circumstances which will entail prosecution. It's a tragedy rooted in the worst agony of parents. So in addition to being punitive in such circumstances, the law can also be effective, the law must also be effective rehabilitation and reinsertion. Effectiveness rests on human capital, qualified and with updated skills. Unfortunately, the consumption of dangerous drugs is becoming more and more widespread among minors and children at schools and colleges. This is having a detrimental effect on many youngsters, and it is therefore imperative that a special attention be given as to how this should be curtailed. A blanket legislation is needed to cover the definition of synthetic drugs. Mr. Speaker, no one should allow our kids to die from synthetic drugs. We have to save our kids, and we have to enlist the services of foot soldiers to save those kids from the synthetic drugs. The PNQ of the Leader of Opposition has sent cold shivers down the spine over availability of roll-up papers for tobacco and synthetic drugs. Police inquiry, we are told, is on, but justice delayed is justice denied. The police has to expedite. Synthetic drugs are damaging the mental status of our youth. Be it synthetic drugs, cocaine, heroin, all have major side effects. And addiction is an inevitable risk and peril. Marijuana is less harmful, others are more harmful, cigarettes kill. Those who will be referred by police to the office of the DPP will not be prosecuted for that offense, but to be referred, as has been stated earlier, to the Drug Users Administrative Panel. After careful inquiry, to undergo rehabilitation to an institution as may be approved by the minister. War on drugs is an uphill battle to save a generation and a country. Let us be inspired by relative success stories in other jurisdictions. The Portugal model has its merits, and to some extent the amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act are outcome of the variant of the Portugal model. Repressive measures against victims can spell disaster, and I lay emphasis upon victims. Traffickers are the curse. We have to put our best endeavors to save our children. And if I tell you, the number of patients admitted as substance abusers in Brown Sequard Hospital is shockingly high, and you'd be appalled and flabbergasted. Our general hospitals have dedicated wards as consequence of a rising incidence of drug addicts. Adi Lazer was right when he stated without fear or prejudice, la situation est alarmante sur le terrain. Danny Phillips, José Atun, Josette Talari, Imran Tufani, and other social activists have rung the alarm bell to highlight the deep-seated concern over shortage of facilities in any of the centres d'accueil to rehabilitate the victims. It's force majeure, it's compelling, and this is the naked truth. The untold story is bound to unfold. We are in a state of emergency. The nation has to declare war on drugs. The bill is a late harvest of the proposals and recommendations made by the chairman of the Commission of Inquiry and his assessors. I will not say, in relation to the bill, la montagne a couché une souris. But the plea for an early harvest was made by one of the former assessors, former Minister of Social Security, our good friend, Mr. Sam Luton. His request was ignored by the regime. Time is of an essence, but unfortunately, the regime acts when interests have to be served. Since late 2015, there's been an epic rise in the consumption of dangerous drugs, and according to United Nations Drugs, the UNDOC, Mauritius is a hub for drug trafficking. I depone, Mr. Speaker, before the Commission of Inquiry to highlight my deep-seated concern over a scourge which is harming our youth. At the time, the nation was expecting the Prime Minister to do the same. He had turned a blind eye, chose to look elsewhere, not to depose, despite the shocking statement made by Mr. Pirumal. Commission of Inquiry is also a stark reminder to the nation of the strong nexus between certain members of the MSM and the drug barons, of great bondage indeed when it comes to financing of their electoral campaign. For the sake of our children, grandchildren, let us come together as a nation, as one people, put up a common front to ward off the threats from the biggest scourge of our society, our great little ocean state. Let me refer to the recommendation, which is the very essence of the bill. Despite its lacunae, the bill has three bearings, which, if well harnessed, should deliver. The setting up of the Drug User Advisory Administrative Panel, the Medical Cannabis Therapeutic Committee, and I've been told, Mr. Speaker, that there are 10%, that there's 10% of the population, almost 120,000 persons, who need cannabis oil. And we are talking of its therapeutical benefits, which can be responsive to 15 different pathologies. It is used as a therapy on its own and as an adjunct therapy. Then we have the role of the FSL and extended powers of the police. I will comment on each of the specific items. The Drug User Administrative Panel was one of the measures proposed by Lam Shanlin Commission after the NGO advocated the decriminalization of the drug based on the Portugal model of decriminalization of drug use introduced since 2001. I do appreciate that the word offenders I've stated earlier has been replaced by the word user. Mr. Speaker, there are existing problems within the model as it is proposed in the bill, and some of these concerns have been raised by Honorable Béranger. And I made it a point to talk to prominent social workers, psychologists, among whom is Mr. Kunal Naik, psychologist, addictologist, and advisory council member of the International Drug Policy Consortium and to forensic psychiatrists. They have lined up to support the stand taken by many social workers to treat drug use as a public health issue rather than a legal one, providing adequate health and social measures for people suffering from addiction, which is a chronic relapse disorder. And as matters stand, the offense appears on the certificate of character. Mr. Bislal is in favor of decriminalization of consumption of marijuana, referred to Chapter 2 of the Constitution, protection of fundamental rights and freedom of the individual. Earlier, Honorable Béranger did raise the point that we need to amend the legislation in relation to certificate of character so that the character of a person who is victim of drug is not blemished. There are strong signals that away from the legal system, direct access to treatment, social reinsertion, and integration is easier. But there should be no stigmatization. The number of people being sent to prison for repeated consumption of offenses will go down. The incidence of HIV and hepatitis C among drug users within closed settings will be on the downtrend. And I recall, under the Labour government, the exchange needle program was set up by the then minister, and it yielded positive results. All avenues have to be explored, and policy decisions are made on substantial empirical and scientific evidence. The panel should be the strongest organization to break the link in the conveyor belt of drug addiction. How to make it work? As I say, the current panel being proposed through the Drug User Administrative Panel is focused on law enforcement, but lacks professional trained in addiction. At the very least, the panel members will have to undergo adequate training to be able to understand the root causes of addiction. The technical team is needed to conduct the social inquiry to ascertain that the background of the people appearing before the panel. It will need to be trained and to adopt the multidimensional approach comprising of other ministries such as social integration, youth and sports, and Ministry of Education will need to be involved. Mr. Speaker, the harm reduction and rehabilitation should be eventful with positive outcome. It was a pity that NATRESA was done away with by the regime and its appendages. I'm sure many people would recall the controversy over the methadone treatment provoked by the regime of MSM. And methadone has been used for decades to treat people who are addicted to heroin and narcotic pain medicine. Mr. Speaker, many people have made a strong case for decriminalizing small possession and consumption of marijuana. And I don't want to go into history, but we know the circumstances which brought the closure of ganja shop at the time. And the BAT was instrumental in closing the shops. And of course, the government of the day, the colonial government, did away with the shops for reasons which suited those who were close to them. It is a fact also, Mr. Speaker, that there is some tolerance in relation to certain festivities. I'm not making a case for marijuana, but I'm saying that it has therapeutic benefits, as has been rightly highlighted by the minister. And the availability of the drug should not be too restrictive. And I appeal to the minister that this drug should be made available in due time and should be dispensed by pharmacists after, of course, a prescription in relation to restrictive drug is submitted after a patient has seen a doctor. And I appeal to the minister to revisit this. I agree it is an early harvest. He cannot speed it up, but we need to give due concern to this. You know as well as I do, when you travel to South Africa, the cannabis oil the cannabis oil is available at the airport, and it's over the counter. So I appeal to the minister to revisit what we know the drugs which can be more harmful, and these are available and dispensed by pharmacies when prescription is given. So I appeal that, to the minister, and I'm sure he will give due consideration. And I would want him also to answer specific question in relation to structures which will be put in place by the ministry and other line ministries to support the panel. Our rehabilitation centers, both of the Ministry of Health and the NGO, currently operating up to international standards. Do rehabilitation centers have enough funding and qualified staff to be able to provide the adequate treatment that people need? Will previous drug users be fined or arrested for possession and consumption be given clear certificate of character, which I've stated? Mr. Speaker, under Clause 4, Section 7A, Section 7A has been inserted. In relation to importation of medicinal cannabis, I would like the minister to tell us how will authorization be given? The request for treatment with medicinal cannabis is too tight. I agree that control should be rigorous, but there's no need to go on a round trip for the medicine to be dispensed, as I've stated earlier. Because, psychotropic drugs are sold in pharmacies as prescribed drugs. These are more dangerous, and yet they are available. I will come now to Clause 19, new Section 10A, sub B. The minister would have to tell us gladly to whom contract to import medicinal cannabis would be allocated, from which country and lab the medicinal cannabis would be imported, who will import, the ministry or wholesaler? If yes, who will decide on the wholesale? And we'd like to do also on the storage of safekeeping of the medicinal cannabis. The minister is yet to define and tell us and inform the House as to where this is going to be kept. The Forensic Scientific Lab will be streamlined through its empowerment to analyze samples of dangerous drug seized. As the power of the police, this has been raised. I won't come into it, but let me come to Section 58A. That is the destruction of drugs. I appeal to the minister that this should be fully complied with, and because we know that in the past, some of those drugs have ended up on domestic market or transshipped to more remunerative market to swell the pockets of some undesirable character. And we also are worried in relation to what the ADSU and others can do, although ADSU has recovered lost ground and is doing a better job these days. So let me, Mr. Speaker, conclude by saying that there's much work to be done. We have traveled miles, but I expect the minister to be practical and to be pragmatic. We are waging war, an intensive war, on the problems of drugs. I appeal to the minister to see to it that we address the problem which is besetting our young people, because the issue of synthetic drugs is a real problem and is doing a lot of harm to our people. Finally, I will impress upon the minister to make it easy for people to have access to the cannabis, cannabis drug for therapeutic purposes, and not to create undue delay, because he has stated very clearly as to why there's a need to use this to make good use of to make good therapeutic use of cannabis. And we know that there are, as I've said earlier, as many as 10% of the population would need this medication. It can be used as an adjunct therapy or a therapy on its own. I pray that lessons are learned and drawn, and it's always wise to compare and contrast, and it's good to find out what Réunion has done. Why is it that Réunion, there is no issue of synthetic drugs as exists in Mauritius? I'm not saying that because marijuana is available or that there's a de facto decriminalization of the problem, but we need to learn lessons and draw from the Réunion Island experience. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, sir, let me first of all congratulate my good friend, Honorable Dr. Kale Jagatpal, for bringing this piece of legislation to the House. Listening to Dr. Boulel, I don't think there's much to rebut because Dr. Jagatpal was pretty clear when presenting the bill. And when talking about pre-conviction, be it delayed action of this government, be it synthetic drug, all this has already been addressed. C'est vraiment là aller chercher la petite bête. Je serais bien tenté de dire de réadapter cette proverbe chinois. Quand le sage monte la lune, l'opposition regarde le doigt. Since the general election held in November 2019, this government is approaching 30 bills that have been enacted. And I must say, some of these laws can be defined as landmark achievements, where many ministers and the respective governments in the past have failed despite all their efforts. For example, we have the Climate Change Act, Beach Authority Act, National Environment Cleaning Agency that will cater for a better environment. Huge steps, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have the Children Act, Children Court, two laws that have a major impact on our youth since the implementation, and the amendment to the Road Traffic Act to detect drivers under the influence of drugs, another key legislation in our attempt to make our drivers more responsible and reduce the amount of accidents on our roads. Just to name a few, Mr. Speaker, sir, and today, this very government is coming into this August Assembly with yet another historic piece of legislation. Going directly to the bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 59A ensures the creation of a drug users administrative panel. This means, as my colleagues have already mentioned before me, that a drug user will, from the moment this bill is enacted and implemented, be considered as a patient, not as a criminal. And history will retain that it is this government has made this a reality. Away from blah, 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 away from walkouts, away from insulting in parliament, it is this government that walking the talk. They may as much as they want, but history will retain once again that once we were working hard to save the youth of this country, they were sitting on the other side of the house making, According to surveys, it hurts, Mr. Speaker, sir, when today the government of Pravin Jagannath bringing this type of legislation, and those who are supposed to have been his historical leaders sitting on the bench of election and losing one after the other, and another defeat is coming ahead. According to surveys, Mr. Speaker, sir, the majority of drug users in Mauritius are aged between 18 to 24 years old. This is a very sad observation, Mr. Speaker, sir. Our youth, the future of this nation, entangled early in this vicious circle that drug use is. The government is sparing no efforts to track down those barons la drogue. Des saisies records, Monsieur le Président. à se demander ce que faisaient les autorités avant 2014. To imagine the ton of drugs that have been entering our territory freely is one scary thought. Now maybe we can understand why, despite several requests of the MSM, then in the opposition for a commission of inquiry, has never been entertained. Since 2017 and May 2022, 13.7 billion rupees worth of drugs has been seized, Mr. Speaker, sir. If not for the ADSU, these drugs would have ended up on our streets, inside the body of many young Mauritian citizens, and so many families would have suffered. We have to pay tribute to the amazing work currently being done, be it by the ADSU or the especially striking team of ASP Jagai. Ruthless, fearless, and efficient. The striking team is in fact now striking fear among the drugs lords. I'm sure my colleague, Honorable Kunjusha, mentioned it. We all have seen that barrister pris la main dans le sac. And we know who are those who've been defending him. And we now understand once again why they have always refused that commission of inquiry on drugs. And it was a government led by Sani Rujagnat, the MSM government and allies, who initiated the commission of inquiry. They can struggle all they want, Mr. Speaker, sir, but the truth always prevails. And in this case, the evidence is overwhelming. And we all have seen, earlier the leader of the opposition was coming with his PNQ, and we all have seen that famous JA on pictures on the day of counting in constituency number 10, and we all have seen which color of T-shirt he was wearing. And who else was in the picture? By considering a person who has been found in possession of a small quantity of any drug, we are offering a second chance to thousands of Mauritian citizens to follow treatment and come back on the right path, instead of facing jail time, ruin the certificate of character, face this stigmatization, and carry this burden for their whole life. Can you imagine what this means to our youth? I'm in no way. And this is not a reason to encourage drug use. On the contrary, they will still be under the scrutiny of the authority. But now, the approach will be different. To be fair, there is no point in filling our prisons with one-time drug users, it's true. In most cases, instead of learning from the incarceration, which is a punishment, they are rejected by society, sometimes, let's admit, too cruel, and end up in a much worse situation. While we, the government, can help these people realize that their mistake does not necessarily mean the end of their lives. They can still bounce back and lead a normal life. And this government is giving the opportunity in here. Also, Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a need to treat addiction. It is possible, and the Drug Users Administrative Panel will be able to identify those who are in need of treatment and also encourage others who wish to benefit from this treatment but are scared of any form of retaliation. And earlier, Dr. Boulel was speaking about increase in number of people seeking treatment. Of course, because now, thanks to this very competent team, of the Ministry of Health, which is led by my good friend Dr. Jagat Pal. They have opened one center in Brown Sequoia Hospital. They have a fully renovated center in Maibo, and I think there is one more center that is being opened currently. So obviously, that increase is due because we are now giving opportunity to those who have fallen into this trap to come forward and seek treatment. Another major breakthrough, Mr. Speaker, sir, thanks to this bill, is medicinal cannabis. And of course, this had nothing to do with legalization of marijuana or whatever. Here we are talking medical. As specified in clause 28A, there are very specific situations where the medicinal cannabis can be administered to a patient, and that too under very strict conditions and airtight monitoring by the authorities as specified in clause 28B to K. They will bring enormous relief to patients that suffer from multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, patients that undergo chemotherapy, and severe pain that other medications have not been able to appease. This piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir, is inspired from the Portugal model, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Bulel, which was adopted in 2000. Since then, the amount of death related to drug use had considerably decreased. 6 deaths per million of inhabitants as compared to 23.7 per million across Europe. The Portuguese prison population has also witnessed a dramatic change from 40% of the inmates jailed for drug offenses to a mere 15% in 2019. This policy has also witnessed considerable drop in drug use and HIV infections. The Portuguese government was able to save massive amount of public funds due to considerable reduction in prosecution for drug offenses and imprisonment. Now imagine if a small country like Mauritius can emulate such a big country like Portugal. There is an estimated 55,000 drug users in Mauritius. What if we could set a realistic target by reducing this amount to 50% as soon as 2030? I heard a lot of NGOs representatives not criticizing, but making valuable propositions. I'm sure my good friend, Honorable Jagat Pal, will consider where he deems fit. There exists no perfect piece of legislation, but you must all agree that we always have to start somewhere. And this bill is a giant step in the right direction, whether you on the other side of this house liked it or not. You may, again, as much as you want. I'm convinced many amongst you would have wished to take credit for such a bill. And hearing some, it sounds more fuming out of frustration and agony than anything else. But you will have to accept that it is Dr. Jagat Pal, this government, the Prime Minister, Pravin Kumar Jagnnath, who will take the credit for it. But fortunately, you picked the wrong side. Time is ticking. Come faster. Le train de la modernisation, du développement et du progrès socio-économique a atteint sa vitesse de croisière. Et nous allons poursuivre dans cette même direction avec la même conviction et la même détermination. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is the MSM who have set up the Commission of Inquiry of Drugs, and we are now implementing its findings, including this bill. This shows that this government is serious in its fight against drug trafficking, rooting out drug dealers, and at the same time protecting our Mauritian citizens. This is a caring government with a social agenda and already an impressive list of realizations that will help improve the quality of life of our population. And this bill, once enacted, will represent a historical step for our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir.
Monsieur le Président, on entend souvent parler de paradigm shift dans cette auguste Assemblée. Et je suis content de constater que pour notre collègue, le ministre de la Santé, cela n'a pas été qu'un terme superflu quand avec ce projet de loi, The Dangerous Drug Amendment Bill, le docteur Jagat Pal nous propose des amendements fondamentaux dans notre approche contre le fléau de la drogue. En effet, Monsieur le Président, ce texte de loi a pour but principal d'amender le Dangerous Drugs Act afin de pouvoir implémenter les recommandations de la commission d'enquête sur la drogue initiée d'ailleurs par ce gouvernement en 2015. Le rapport de la commission d'enquête Lam Chamling s'est avéré être un outil important dans notre combat contre la drogue. Une feuille de route pour mettre en place des méthodes holistiques afin de prévenir la prolifération de stupéfiants dans notre société. Monsieur le Président, l'usage de la drogue touche toutes les couches de la société, inquiète de nombreux parents et représente un réel danger pour nos jeunes qui malheureusement se laissent facilement influencer. Monsieur le Président, il n'y a pas de réponse simple ou directe face à cette problématique complexe qui mêle à la fois la morale, la santé publique, la justice et la police, et à ce jour, les méthodes répressives peinent à faire leurs preuves. Selon le rapport en date du 26 juin 2022 de l'Office des Nations Unies contre la drogue, en 10 ans, le nombre de dépendants à la drogue dans le monde a augmenté de 25% selon leur enquête. Et à Maurice, Monsieur le Président, le commissaire de police, le lundi 3 octobre 2022 dernier, face à la presse, a annoncé une saisie record de plus de 77 millions de roupies de drogue, rien que pour le mois de septembre 2022. Si cela démontre d'une part que les autorités travaillent sérieusement contre ce fléau, mais d'autre part, cette annonce révèle malheureusement que les drogues continuent à s'infiltrer dans notre société et à mettre en péril l'avenir de nos jeunes et la vie de nos citoyens. Monsieur le Président, un changement de paradigme est donc essentiel et on devrait mettre davantage l'accent sur la prévention, le traitement et la réhabilitation plutôt que la répression. Comme inscrit dans la note explicative de ce texte de loi, voici les 3 points essentiels. 1. Si une personne est soupçonnée d'avoir commis un délit de drogue pour sa propre consommation, elle ne sera pas poursuivie, mais sera renvoyée devant la Drug User Administrative Panel sur recommandation du DPP, et si par la suite il est déterminé que son offense en relation à la drogue relève uniquement à sa consommation personnelle et qu'elle n'est pas impliquée dans du trafic de drogue, il sera recommandé que cette personne soit dirigée vers des programmes de réhabilitation et de réinsertion sociale ou d'autres thérapies dans un établissement de santé. 2. Ce projet de loi prescrit aussi des provisions pour qu'un patient puisse être traité avec du cannabis médicinal lorsqu'il souffre de conditions thérapeutiques spécifiques dans des cas où les conditions thérapeutiques ne sont pas efficaces suite à un traitement conventionnel. Et pour cela, Monsieur le Président, un comité, le Medicinal Cannabis Therapeutic Committee, sera mis en place dans chaque hôpital régional afin de déterminer si un patient a besoin de cannabis médicinal pour son traitement. 3. La Forensic Science Laboratory pourra, comme c'est le cas dans d'autres juridictions, analyser un échantillon seulement de drogue saisie au lieu de devoir analyser toute la drogue saisie, et la police aura plus de pouvoir pour qu'elle puisse mieux détecter des infractions liées aux drogues et sur ordre d'un magistrat détruire les drogues dangereuses saisies au lieu de les conserver pour les présenter devant un tribunal. Monsieur le Président, nos enfants ne nous pardonneront pas de ne pas avoir érigé les remparts nécessaires contre les barons de la drogue. Mr. Speaker, sir, the world is facing predicament, and we must adapt, move with our time, and we must address the challenging scourge of drugs with an open mindset. Despite the challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic, war, and a difficult global economic situation, we are determined to fulfill our government program. We have already fulfilled the salary minimum, the negative income tax, the old age pension, to name a few. There are also many life-changing projects that are underway and being implemented, such as the Metro Express, drain, roads, and a variety of amenities being built around the island for the well-being of our population. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mauritius also faces challenges that are consuming our society à petit feu for far too long. Our youth are increasingly being victims to drug abuse, and we are witnessing families being destroyed by this nefarious plague, threatening the future of our country. The people and the members of this August Assembly will remember that when the current Prime Minister was in the opposition, he sincerely requested several times for a commission of inquiry on drugs. Alas, it was never initiated by the then government, and we can only wonder why. However, in 2015, the government made a commitment to set up a commission of inquiry on dangerous drugs that will give us the fundamentals and the proper recommendation to consistently combat drug proliferation in our society. After 3 years of meticulous research and work in 2018, we took cognizance of the findings of the report, and we understood that the importance of a careful implementation of the recommendation was very important. As Mr. Speaker, sir, the drug problem indeed is a serious one, and it cannot be done in a haphazard way. The report does recommend that a holistic approach be privileged, and this is what we are doing. Mr. Speaker, sir, I understand that out of the 460 recommendations in the report, over 50% have been implemented, and I am convinced that we will keep progressing. The government is determined to win the battle against dangerous drugs, and we know the genuine commitment of our Prime Minister, the Honorable Pravin Jagnnath, to have a drug-free society. Mr. Speaker, sir, such a serious problem that is threatening our society requires that we have a 360-degree approach and ensure that we do not leave anyone behind. This is why it is vital that all stakeholders, not only the government, but everyone should feel concerned, starting from the grassroots organization, be involved in this effort. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must understand that the first victim of the drug is the person who is lured and trapped into consumption. Unfortunately, rather than rescuing a drug consumer, our laws spiral them down through punishment and reclusion. It is unfortunate that they do not spiral down alone. They take down with them their loved ones and families. Drug consumers who are victims very often are seeking for a way out and are hopelessly entangled as they fear the repression. Mr. Speaker, sir, we should seek to understand, we should seek to help them rather than punishing them. This is what this proposed amendment intends to do, particularly with the introduction of the Drug Users Administrative Panel. According to a paper published by the Drug Policy Alliance, Decriminalizing Drug Possession and Investing in Treatment and Addiction, health can provide major benefits for public safety and health. The benefits include minimizing the social exclusion of people who use drugs and creating a climate in which they are less fearful of seeking help and accessing treatment for addiction and rehabilitation, reducing the number of people arrested and the number of people incarcerated, and therefore reducing criminal justice costs. This allows redirection of resources from criminal justice to health systems while increasing uptake into drug treatment, protecting people from wide-ranging and debilitating consequences of a criminal conviction, redirecting law enforcement resources to prevent serious and violent crime, and improving relations between law enforcement and the community. Highlighting this last point, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to stress that the leniency and mercy shown to drug consumers' victims is by no means an excuse to let the drug traffickers off the hook. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, sir, we should continue to pursue our efforts to clean our society of this scourge. I seize the opportunity to thank the Honourable Prime Minister and the law enforcement officers for the tremendous work they have been doing, as we can witness the several drug seizures over the past month. Lots have been said, Mr. Speaker, sir, about the use of medicinal cannabis and its benefits. With this proposed amendment, the government shows that it will not shy away from adopting new means and methods for the benefits of our society and help people find relief in their pain. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, we must appreciate and gather that we need to be cautious here. The proposed bill sets up the required framework to ensure that the use of cannabis be done in a healthy and a controlled manner. Mr. Speaker, sir, we can see by its action that our government has the combat against drugs very high in its agenda. It, however, wants to do it in a humane way and ensure that we do not create more victims while making sure the criminals are locked away. Pour conclure, Monsieur le Président, le combat contre la drogue est la responsabilité de tout le monde. Nous ne devons pas hypothéquer l'avenir de notre pays afin d'essayer de marquer des points politiques sur un sujet aussi important. Ce fléau nécessite une attention particulière et les solutions ne sont pas simples et demandent une réflexion et une implémentation judicieuse. L'amendement proposé par ce texte essaie de mettre en place une série de mesures et de concepts prometteuses. La soutenir sera une action patriotique. With these words, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to thank and congratulate the Ministry of Health and Wellness for this bold and daring piece of legislation. I highly recommend this meaningful bill to the House, and I thank you for your attention.
Monsieur le Président, je focaliserai mon intervention uniquement sur le cannabis médical, du fait que mes collègues de parti se concentrent sur les autres aspects des amendements du Dangerous Drug Act. Il était temps que le cannabis médical soit autorisé pour soigner nos malades. Je me réjouis que désormais l'île Maurice s'aligne avec l'Organisation des Nations Unies qui, en décembre 2020, suite aux recommandations de l'OMS en 2019, a officiellement reconnu l'utilité médicale du cannabis. Suite à ces amendements, l'île Maurice fera partie de ces nombreux pays, des pays tels l'Australie, le Canada, le Danemark, l'Allemagne, l'Angleterre, Sri Lanka, le Rwanda, parmi tant d'autres, qui autorisent une forme de cannabis à des fins médicales. Cela fait plusieurs années que l'opposition plaide pour l'introduction du cannabis thérapeutique, mais ces plaidoyers, malheureusement, jusqu'à tout récemment, se sont heurtés à des refus. On se souvient de cet ancien sportif, champion d'haltérophile, athlète olympique et atteint d'un cancer, qui implorait ce gouvernement de considérer le cannabis médical car il devait se rendre régulièrement, pendant des mois durant, à l'étranger pour effectuer ses traitements. Non seulement il devait faire d'énormes dépenses pour ses déplacements et logements, mais il devait aussi endurer seul ces thérapies, sans proches ou amis pour le soutenir. Je me réjouis donc de ce demi-tour qui bénéficiera à tous ces malades qui espéraient, tout comme cet ancien sportif, et pourront désormais trouver soulagement. Monsieur le Président, en médecine, le cannabis est utilisé pour ses qualités antalgiques, antispasmodiques et anti-inflammatoires. Et il doit ses effets à ses molécules dérivées, les cannabinoïdes, dont le tétrahydrocannabinol, en abrégé THC, un agent psychoactif, et le cannabidiol, en abrégé CBD, à l'action relaxante et sédative. Comme pour toute substance, il y a des risques. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle l'usage du cannabis médical nécessite précaution, un encadrement adéquat et un suivi médical étroit. Le principal effet secondaire induit par le cannabis médical est la somnolence, donc une baisse de vigilance. Et c'est pour cela que je propose qu'il soit interdit de conduire après sa prise, comme c'est déjà le cas en Australie. Monsieur le Président, chaque patient à qui l'on prescrit du cannabis thérapeutique passe par une phase de titration, c'est-à-dire une période pendant laquelle la dose de THC et ou de CBD doit être adaptée pour atteindre la meilleure efficacité en limitant les risques d'effets secondaires. Un suivi régulier et donc de rigueur afin que les ajustements nécessaires puissent être faits promptement. La THC, Monsieur le Président, est la molécule responsable d'un risque d'addiction. De ce fait, le risque de dépendance existe et varie en fonction du ratio du THC, de la fréquence d'usage et de la forme d'administration. Mais il est aussi probable que les variations génétiques de chaque individu jouent un rôle dans le niveau de risque. C'est la raison pour laquelle les patients doivent bénéficier d'encadrement et de suivi vigoureux afin de minimiser ces risques de dépendance. Mais, Monsieur le Président, ce projet de loi ne prévoit rien pour l'encadrement et le suivi, élément critique pourtant. Je propose que la responsabilité d'encadrer et de faire le suivi des patients soit ajoutée aux fonctions des Medicinal Cannabis Therapeutic Committees de chaque hôpital régional. De plus, Monsieur le Président, selon le paragraphe 28C, ce sont ces Medicinal Cannabis Therapeutic Committees qui ont pour tâche d'évaluer les requêtes et de les approuver ou les rejeter. Et chaque comité sera composé de 4 membres, le Regional Health Director, 2 spécialistes agréés du secteur public et un pharmacien agréé. Il existerait 5 différents comités avec diverses personnes siégeant sur chaque comité qui décideront d'approuver ou de rejeter les applications. Et cela peut ouvrir la porte à beaucoup d'incohérences et de discordances dans la manière d'évaluer les demandes. Par exemple, il ne faut pas que 2 patients souffrant de la même maladie et de façon similaire fassent leur requête dans 2 hôpitaux différents et à 2 comités différents, que l'un soit approuvé et l'autre rejeté. Il est donc impératif que chaque membre des 5 comités reçoive une formation, une ligne directive et des critères clairs à suivre. Monsieur le Président, il faut savoir que le cannabis médical peut interférer avec d'autres médicaments et modifier leur efficacité. Là encore, la prudence s'impose et la National Pharmacovigilance Committee doit surveiller de près les probables effets indésirables et les interactions médicamenteuses. Il faut aussi s'assurer, Monsieur le Président, que les produits importés répondent aux normes médicales appropriées, approuvées par les agences régulatrices reconnues, car certains produits non réglementés ne sont pas correctement étiquetés et leur composition imprécise. Pour le moment, Monsieur le Président, le cannabis médical est prescrit uniquement pour des conditions telles que sclérose en plaques, épilepsie sévère, nausées des soins en cancérologie et pour soulager les patients dont les douleurs sévères et persistantes ne cèdent pas avec des antalgiques traditionnels. Cependant, afin d'élargir les pathologies éligibles pour qu'un plus grand nombre de patients puissent bénéficier des traitements, par exemple pour les maladies neurodégénératives comme Alzheimer, je propose la mise sur pied d'une étude approfondie qui se penchera sur le sujet et peut-être même étudier la viabilité d'une probable industrie locale de cannabis médical qui pourrait être bénéfique à notre économie. Monsieur le Président, dans le paragraphe 28H, il est dit que « There shall be in every regional hospital a register of medical cannabis to be kept in such manner as the permanent secretary may determine ». Il serait impératif que ce registre en question soit sous forme électronique et que les données de chaque patient soient accessibles en ligne dans chaque hôpital régional. Cela fait plusieurs années que je demande la digitalisation de notre système de santé publique et l'implémentation complète de l'e-health. Cela évitera l'emmêlement de dossiers, les dossiers égarés et minimisera aussi les abus de toutes sortes. Monsieur le Président, je déplore qu'il n'ait indiqué nulle part les contre-indications du cannabis médical. Par prudence, celles-ci devraient être, entre autres, les patients ayant des antécédents de troubles psychotiques et les patients souffrant d'insuffisance cardiaque sévère, car le cannabis peut aggraver une arythmie cardiaque. Par contre, Monsieur le Président, je suis d'accord que la prise du cannabis médical sera autorisée uniquement sous forme de capsules, d'huile ou vaporisateur oromuqueux et que ce médicament ne peut en aucun cas être fumé afin d'assurer la sécurité des patients, car la fumée inhalée est tout aussi dangereuse et cancérigène que celle du tabac. En dernier lieu, Monsieur le Président, malgré sa prévalence dans diverses sociétés à travers le monde, le stigma autour du cannabis médical persiste. Il est présent pas uniquement chez les médecins et personnels médicaux, mais aussi chez les patients. Certains médecins craignent d'être jugés par les autres médecins en prescrivant du cannabis médical. Certains patients sont inquiets que d'être prescrits du cannabis médical pourrait leur impacter au niveau social, culturel, religieux ou professionnel. Certains patients peuvent être hésitants à cause du stigma associé au cannabis comme une substance illégale et craignent d'être considérés comme des toxicomanes. Et ce stigma associé au cannabis médical peut être hautement préjudiciable et faire obstacle à des traitements qui auraient été grandement bénéfiques à la santé de beaucoup de patients souffrant de maladies graves. Il faut donc des campagnes ciblées d'éducation et de sensibilisation du public afin de réduire ce stigma autour du cannabis médical dans notre société. J'ai terminé, Monsieur le Président.
Honorable Chakouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for affording me the opportunity to bring my contribution on the Dangerous Drug Amendment Bill. Allow me to begin by conveying in my stead and on behalf of our people our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. the Honorable Kailesh Jagatpal, Minister of Health and Wellness, for bringing to the House the Dangerous Drug Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022. It goes without saying that the integrity of leadership of our Prime Minister Pravin Kumar Jugnauth helped extremely, and now we have a revitalized health sector that responds to the need of our people. Il est beau de mentionner qu'à 3 reprises, pendant son discours, l'honorable Paul Béranger a reconnu à sa juste valeur ce texte de loi. Je cite, « Ce texte de loi va dans la bonne direction. » Tout comme l'honorable Fukyun Bacha se réjouit de ce projet de loi. Mr. Speaker, sir, humanity has come a long way, leaping ahead with singular temerity into the promise of a better and safer world. Unfortunately, the advent of progress also brought along a blight that soon spread its terrifying tentacles to maim the hopes of millions and not even sparing our shores. Hence, this bill could not come at a more opportune time. This evil is substance abuse, and at one point in time, it was thought that repression and legal punishment would soon wed out this plague. But what has happened is a complete reversal of the world's expectations, wherein hard lines of approach to criminalize drug-related offenses and penalize substance addiction produce a paradoxical effect. The uprise of a black and covered market that relentlessly fed the most vulnerable with false hopes at the expense of the health and livelihood, whilst growing even more powerful with an ever-expanding market, more than often consisting of very young individuals whose very existence will be destroyed ever after. But we learn from our mistakes, from the mistakes of others. We learn from the mistakes of others and offer prolonged consultation and reflection with innumerable stakeholders. It was decided that the most optimal way to tackle the drug scourge was with preventive, proactive, preemptive, and positive sensitization and rehabilitation. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2018 Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking has set off the guiding parameters which motivated the amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act. The bill focuses on the philosophy that those charged with an offense on account of personal consumption of dangerous drugs should, instead of being made to bear the brunt of tough judicial proceedings, be rather afforded the possibility of being processed by the Drug Users Administrative Panel, which seeks to pedagogically, physiologically, psychologically, and socially rehabilitate individuals. Mr. Speaker, sir, everyone should be given a second chance at life, and hard prosecution may not allow this to happen. In this way, we will be preserving the moral, ethical, and psycho-emotional standing of those who had already been tempted once, but preventing them with a chance to climb up again, and thus overcome the scourge through the structured support of the authorities. After all, this is what a government does, to look after the best interests of its citizens, and we will never falter in outreaching to those who are in need. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the same line of thought, the bill provides for the establishment of a medical cannabis therapeutic committee that shall be branched out in every regional hospital to assess and determine the therapeutic needs of patients who have opted for treatment through the use of medical cannabis. Once again, this government keeps in line with the best practices in the expansive fields of curative medicine and pain alleviation domains. Research has concluded that medical cannabis may be considered as part of a therapy, and we have not remained insensible to the far cry of many of our citizens who, in one way or the other, have found a mitigation of physiological condition through medical cannabis. Needless to say that the entire process will be under close scrutiny and strictly monitored in keeping with the practices and laws of the land. Mr. Speaker, sir, on a final count, it was high time that the Forensic Science Laboratory and the police be ascribed with wider powers in a bid to speed up the legal progress in drug-related offenses. Swift justice is the hallmark of a country that prioritizes the rule of law and respect the human rights. The quicker and harder we hit, the more powerful our judicial disposition will be. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me therefore to commend Dr. the Honorable Kailash Jagatpal, Minister of Health and Wellness, and also our Prime Minister, Honorable Pravin Kumar Jatnath, for this bold and laudable step forwards. I thank you for your attention.
Honorable Leopold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the legislative process that is happening tonight is an indication that we are having better understanding of what addiction is all about in this House. Addiction, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a disorder. It is a disease. It is a disease which affects the person's brain, their behaviors, and in turn, they are unable to control the use of substances on which they are hooked on and continually keep on using them despite the harm that they cause. On evidence base, we know that drugs have devastating impact on individuals, families, and the society as a whole. There are so many stories on the extent people will go to get drugs. There are so many crimes associated with drugs. Dealers kill people over argument about drugs. Drug users commit so many random crimes. Drug abuse is bad anytime, but it is worst when it affects families, especially children. The cost of substances abuse to the society is so enormous. Therefore, we must develop public policies aiming at combating the issue of drugs as a public health problem. Many times we had heard heads of religious bodies, and recently the head of the Catholic Church of the Republic of Mauritius, over his concern on drug users, on repressive actions which causing more problem than help to addicts. Instead, we need to come with new approach to ensure that those who are affected with illegal drug use get the help that they are so badly needed. And the new approach, Mr. Speaker, sir, needs to be consisted of discouraging the use of addictive substances, making it harder to obtain illicit addictive substances, and helping victims of drugs addiction to quit. Mr. Speaker, sir, the problems of drugs abuse are here. It's real in the Republic. Law enforcement is very important, that's true. But arresting drug users, drugs addicts, are not a proper approach, and it is not the solution. Drugs problem, illicit drugs usage cannot therefore be undertaken by one department alone. It must be a whole system approach. In Mauritius, we tend to concentrate too much on breaking drug supply chain. Breaking drug supply chains is important, but tonight, if we are all here debating on this amendment, this means that a collective effort is required to combat the scourge of illicit drugs in our society. What this piece of legislation, this amendment, is bringing to our Dangerous Drug Act, is bringing tonight, is very important. What is bringing. it is not to arrest drug users and put into prisons, where, according to the report on the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking itself, stating that drugs trafficking in prison do exist. So it is most importantly in helping drug users to break the cycle of addiction instead. And how are we going to do that? And it is supported by the bill what we are talking about tonight. From now on, after the adoption of this bill, to be able to break the cycle of addiction in the Republic, we will need to have a world-class treatment and recovery system for substances abusers, and discouraging our young fellow citizens, the future of this country, from starting, from trying, and preparing and working on eliminating the demand of illegal drugs over the next generation to come by various evidence-based solutions that are readily available. As, for example, among so many, we have community-based programs, one-on-one screening and counseling, school-based program. Mr. Speaker, sir, for this new strategy that this bill is bringing, for it to be successful, we need strong commitment from successive government by providing sufficient funding on drug enforcement, treatment, and recovery. Tough enforcement action need money and innovative ideas in order to dismantle the business model of drug trafficking. And this enforcement approach need to be coupled, once again, I have to repeat myself, is on breaking the cycle of drugs addiction. And for this to work, funds need to be made readily available, as it will necessitate massive investment in treatment and recovery systems. Because of the colossal amount of money needed to implement this strategy on combating the misuse of drugs, the public will expect to see results, and so do the government. We will need to see significant increase in drugs treatment places, a decrease in the trend of drug-related death, a considerable reduction in crimes and offenses related to drugs dependency. And to achieve that, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I have said earlier, we have to understand that addiction is a chronic illness, and that needs to be understood especially by the law enforcement department. While we are going to draw drug users from dependency through this amendment, drug users will need support to recover. We all know that drug addicts need treatment, but treatment services alone are not sufficient to sustain meaningful recovery. People with problems like housing problem, unemployment issues, for example, need to get additional support for full recovery. And in addition, Mr. Speaker, sir, although that the effect of drug misuse affects the whole country, and that this new strategy needs to be delivered across the whole country, but because it is a costly investment, it is therefore important that this massive investment hit the right target. That is, the areas with the highest level of drugs use. And this can be measured by areas with highest drug-related death and crimes. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am convinced if this strategy is properly implemented, all the untold miseries caused by illegal, addictive substances by users will become something of the past, whereby lives will be preserved and crime rate will be reduced. I am therefore strongly commended this bill to the House, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Honourable members, I'll ask the Deputy Speaker to take over.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Honourable Sanjuman, I understand, is the next.
In fact, I'm lucky. Every time I took the floor, and you cherry. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. L'honorable ministre Bobby Ram sollicite la population pour féliciter le gouvernement. 22 millions de papiers valant 460 millions de roupies autorisés par le gouvernement pour être importés pour usage personnel. Il sollicite la population pour féliciter le gouvernement. Pas une seule condamnation ni arrestation effectuée par là-dessous à ce jour de tous les cas cités dans le rapport Lamchang. Ils veulent que la population le félicite. Honorable Deputy Speaker, thank you. I will just point out some observations, and I will be very brief. At the very outset, I have to say that albeit some reservations, some apprehensions regarding the implementation process, as rightly pointed out by Honorable Béranger and Honorable Boulel and other colleagues who took the floor before me. Like the Mauritius Food Standards Agency bill presented to the House last week, the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill proposed are non-controversial, and we welcome it. This bill has too little, too late, since the recommendations of the Commissions of Inquiry on drug trafficking date back to 2018. Yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, 4 years have been elapsed. But I can understand why it took so long. Why it took so long for the government to react, since the Lam Shangling report has been a big blow to them. We all know who were targeted in the report and to which party they belong. Anyway, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the main object of this bill is to enable treatment with medicinal cannabis. We heartily welcome this measure. In fact, it was included in the Alliance Nationale Manifesto for the last election in 2019. And at that time, I recall the government thought it was premature. It was premature to consider the authorization of the use of product containing cannabis for treatment purposes. At least that's what the Prime Minister himself said in reply to a PNQ on the 15th of May, 2018. And today I'm glad to see that the government has since then reviewed its position. We are convinced that this will be only beneficial to many patients, especially those suffering from cancer, sclerosis, seizure disorders, or epilepsy, as we call it, who failed to respond to conventional treatment. But at the same time, we have to ensure that we set up a proper mechanism in order for it to be effective. We also have to ensure that we get safe and high quality product. I see that this bill gives the authority to the Ministry of Health to supervise the use, dispensing, and importation of medicinal cannabis. I cannot help but wonder, Mr. Deputy Speaker, whether the Ministry of Health should be given such a big responsibility. We all know what happened during the confinement. We all know what happened during the confinement period, Mr. Deputy Speaker, how the Ministry of Health misused the emergency procurement, how bijouterie, quincaillerie, and hotel owners got outrageous contracts for importation of medicines and medical equipment, most of which didn't meet our requirements. We know very well what happened with the famous pack and blister ventilators. So can we trust the Ministry of Health to supervise the importation of medicinal cannabis? I'm afraid not, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are not blaming the health officers. Like earlier, the Honorable Minister of Commerce said, it's not him, it's the officers. No, we are not blaming the health officers here, but the minister himself. Look at the Public Accounts Committee report, clearly mentioned that they were being instructed to carry out orders given by the minister. C'est écrit noir sur blanc, Monsieur le Président, dans le rapport. The minister received instructions and we execute as executors of decisions, of policy decisions. It basically means that the minister can allow anyone, any chicopin, any political agents to import medicinal cannabis at an exorbitant price without respecting the criteria and specification as we have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's the risk we are running. This is a very serious matter, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As poor quality product may have serious health implications for those using it. In the case of pack and blister, we lost money, but here we can lose lives. We cannot take any risk, hence I don't think we should leave this in the hands of the health minister, but the supervision should rather be done by an independent body comprising of competent and specialized representatives. I also take note in regards to section 28J2 about importation of medicinal cannabis, that nothing is mentioned about customs. What will be the role of the customs at the time of importation? It has been clearly defined so as to avoid any unwarranted situation. Coming to section 28K and 28L, as far as patients coming from abroad are concerned, there is a need, according to me, to define whether they are foreigners coming to Mauritius for holidays and whether they will go back to their country afterwards, or whether they are foreigners coming to work or study or will stay in the country for some time, whether they are Mauritians coming back to their country after being abroad. Again, I will insist, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that there should be a proper guidelines to avoid any confusion. Coming to another part of the bill where a person suspected of having committed a drug offense for his personal consumption will be referred to a drug users administrative panel instead of being prosecuted. This, I believe, like the previous one I said earlier, we all agree, is indeed a very welcoming measure. Someone who is addicted to drugs is a sick person. He is a victim. He is not a criminal. There is no doubt about it. And we all know that a sick person needs treatment and support. He doesn't deserve to be thrown in jail and convicted like why he is suffering. More so when the drug traffickers themselves, like in the tractable case, are running out scot-free. This is very inhumane. The proper way is to treat and rehabilitate. But once again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I have some apprehension. First and foremost, how long it will take for the police to complete the inquiry. Laissez-moi vous donner un exemple. Il y a un cas. Un certain John Brown, arrêté le 29 avril 2020.
Non.
OK, GB. Arrêté le 29 avril 2020, possession of heroin, cannabis, etc. Product seized 29th of April 2020. The same product sent to FSL only on 11th October 2021, 19 months after. It's not over. It's not over. Now the police will send the case to the DPP. We know very well what happened in the Kisnan case. DPP referred the case to police again. 9 months, nothing done. If we go on these two cases, how many days it will take before a person starts being treated? What will happen in case this person, while waiting for the DPP or the police decision, get caught again for the same reason? And do we know what kind of drug users will be referred to the panel? It is only for those using cannabis, synthetic drugs, brown sugar, or does it apply to those using cocaine also, or other drugs, amongst others? Let's now talk about the rehabilitation process. Will the person who has been referred for treatment be required to stay at a rehabilitation center? And if yes, do we have enough of these centers to cater for these drug victims? We are talking of 100,000 possible victims. Can you imagine? Do we have enough qualified personnel to supervise this process? Are the NGOs well equipped to do this work? What will be the duration of the rehabilitation process? treatment and rehabilitation should be done under strict supervision. This is of utmost importance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. Otherwise, it will give rise to other serious problems. We have recently seen how a 4-year child in my constituency passed away because his grandfather was involved in methadone trafficking. This shows that there is a loophole in our system, and it needs to be tackled right away. So we need to know how the rehabilitation process will be and what are the facilities, resources, and infrastructures that will be put in place for its smooth running. In the same vein, I also wonder what will happen to tourists who are found in possession of drugs for their personal consumption. Will there be any rapid channel that will be put in place to look into the matter, or do we need to wait for the recommendation of DPP and police until he is referred to the Drug Users Administrative Panel? Because if that's the case, it will be a very long process, especially when the number of drug-related cases is on the rise. This has been confirmed not by the Labour Party, not by the population, by the DCP Boiju. Recently, when in presence of the Minister of Health, said that the drug cases have increased by 400%, 300 to 400% since 2015. And the Honorable Minister Bobby Ram want the population to congratulate his government. Can you realize, Mr. Speaker, sir, 400% since 2015? Said by none other than the DCP in presence of our health minister? So I wonder how long it will take for the DPP's office to look into these matters before they are referred to the panel, and what will happen to these tourists having drugs in their possession meanwhile? Will they be detained? Will they be confined in their hotel room? Will they be deported? The law needs to be more explicit. I'm afraid because there is such a risk that a certain category of tourists might find it easy to come to Mauritius to consume drugs, knowing that they don't risk anything. They might end up being an El Dorado for them. As regard to the suspension of prosecution, nothing is mentioned about drug trafficker, who is also a drug consumer, who has been arrested for personal drug consumption. Will he be treated as a victim and be eligible for the treatment? The question arises because it is not specified. So all this need to be clear. Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais aussi savoir qu'adviendra-t-il de ceux qui feront une rechute, quand la possibilité existe bel et bien. Après un premier traitement, seront-ils soumis à un deuxième traitement des intox, ou devront-ils faire face à la justice? Faut-il leur donner une deuxième chance? Le traitement et la réhabilitation ne risquent-ils pas de devenir une éternelle échappatoire pour les toxicomanes endurcis? Il faudra, à mon avis, que la loi soit claire à ce sujet. Now coming to the constitution of the Drug Users Administrative Panel. According to me, the panel should comprise of at least 2-3 persons from drug treatment NGOs, since they have more experience in regards to treatment and follow-up, they might be in a better position to ascertain certain conditions of a drug addict. Je note aussi avec une certaine amertume que rien n'a été dit par rapport à la prévention. Since the dismantlement of the NATRESA way back to in 2015, we still don't have any national drug prevention program. The Prime Minister has been talking for years now about National Drug Control Master Plan. Where is the plan? But instead, we have many masters in drug trafficking. Having said I have 1 minute, just to conclude, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I suggest the Honourable Minister, if we could consider bringing an amendment to allow for a dispensation for consumers of drugs who have obtained a conviction for consumption of drugs to entitle to a clean certificate of morality under the Certificate of Morality Act. Such an amendment would help in removing the system of those consumers so that they can have a second chance to integrate the society. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on 20 minutes. Honorable Sandra Mayet, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me donner l'opportunité de participer à ce débat fort passionnant aujourd'hui dans cette auguste Assemblée. Monsieur le Président, le MSM et ses alliés ont toujours, au cours de l'histoire de notre pays, démontré que nous chérissons chacun de nos concitoyens, que nous voulons les protéger contre les barons la drogue qui s'enrichissent allègrement et sans vergogne sur le dos de nos jeunes en proie à l'addiction. Feu Sir Anirudh Jugnauth était connu pour être un des plus grands combattants contre le trafic de drogue à Maurice. Dans l'histoire récente, c'est le MSM, avec Sir Anirudh Jugnauth à la tête, qui a mis sur pied la commission d'enquête sur tous les aspects de trafic de drogue à Maurice, et cela 6 mois seulement après les élections générales de 2014. C'est aussi après presque une décennie d'impunité envers ces réseaux de distribution des trafiquants de drogue que les choses ont bougé. Après feu Sir Anirudh Jugnauth, il a fallu que ce soit ce gouvernement, avec un courageux Premier ministre en la personne de Pravin Jugnauth à sa tête, au-delà de l'aspect répressif du combat contre la drogue, lui donne un visage humain. Et aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président, le Dr Kailash Jagat-Pal, avec la bénédiction du Premier ministre, présente dans cette auguste Assemblée le Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill. Monsieur le Président, nous ne sommes pas dupes. Nous connaissons tous la différence entre un trafiquant de drogue et un consommateur. La différence entre le raptor et l'addicted qui crie crapaud pour gagner sa pitance ou sa dose. La différence entre celui qui a la vie de château et celui qui harcèle sa pauvre mère à la mort pour 200 roupies 3 fois par jour afin d'éviter ce fatien qui, il ou elle craint plus que tout au monde. La différence entre ceux qui peuvent se payer des avocats hors de prix pour trouver les failles juridiques afin d'être blanchis et ceux qui remplissent nos prisons. Nous ne pouvons rester insensibles, les bras croisés, à regarder mourir ces jeunes, ces hommes et ces femmes de notre République, Monsieur le Président, à voir pleurer une maman qui perd son enfant promis à un bel avenir, tombée dans cette servitude et victime de cette plaie de notre société, de ce crime organisé qui est l'enfer de la drogue. Monsieur le Président, l'addiction est l'affaire de tous. Les personnes de tous âges, genres, statuts peuvent être en proie à l'addiction. Ça peut arriver à n'importe qui, peu importe notre statut social, notre communauté ou nos origines. L'Organisation mondiale de la santé définit d'ailleurs l'addiction comme un état de dépendance périodique ou chronique à des substances ou à des comportements. Il est maintenant prouvé, au-delà de tout doute, que l'addiction est une maladie, Monsieur le Président. L'addiction aux substances crée une dépendance très forte, une descente aux enfers, entraînant une conduite compulsive. Nous sommes trop souvent bien aises à juger ceux qui souffrent de l'addiction, sans toutefois nous poser des questions sur comment beaucoup de nos frères et sœurs se retrouvent prisonniers de cet abîme sans fin. Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement progresse avec une constance dans ses convictions en ce qu'il s'agit du combat contre le trafic de drogue. Les multiples saisies de drogue de toutes sortes en quantité faramineuse en témoignent de la volonté de ce gouvernement et du Premier ministre à protéger ses concitoyens. Les petits consommateurs de drogue embourbés dans l'asservissement ne sont pas ceux qui sont dans les viseurs des autorités. Ce projet de loi que nous examinons aujourd'hui tend la main aux usagers de drogue qui ne peuvent s'en sortir tout seuls. Ce projet de loi, Monsieur le Président, tente à connecter ces hommes et femmes, ces mères et pères, ces filles et fils aux solutions existantes et aux solutions nouvelles, afin qu'ils et elles retrouvent une vie plaisante. Non, Monsieur le Président, il n'y a plus de Nissa quand on a besoin de voler ses parents pour engraisser Ban Bourgeois-là. Quand un mari a besoin de dévaliser toute la maison pour sa dose quotidienne, quand tout le salaire de fin de mois passe aux mains des vendeurs de la mort, quand le synthétique batte dans la tête, non, il n'y a plus de Nissa. Monsieur le Président, aujourd'hui, il est nécessaire de soutenir ceux qui souffrent de la dépendance aux substances nocives, mais il est tout aussi important de décourager la consommation illégale de ces substances. Nul ne devrait accepter de voir un jeune tomber dans l'enfer de la drogue. Le gouvernement offre déjà des soins aux usagers de drogue dans les Addictology Units, dans les hôpitaux régionaux, dans les hôpitaux à Maïbourg, à Montagne-Longue. Une panoplie de programmes de soins, donc le programme de soins à base de méthadone, les programmes de prévention en cours dans les écoles avec les jeunes, les programmes d'information et de sensibilisation pour les usagers de drogue et leurs familles. Et tout dernièrement, cette belle initiative du gouvernement pour prévenir la toxicomanie et protéger notre jeunesse, le projet YEPAD, le Youth Empowerment Program Against Drugs, qui est une initiative du ministère de la Santé et du Bien-être. Il est bon également de rappeler, Monsieur le Président, que nous avons déjà 3 Prescribed Centers à Maurice, c'est-à-dire le Centre de Solidarité, le Centre d'accueil de Terre-Rouge, le Centre Idriss Goumani. Comment ça se passe actuellement? Eh bien, si l'avocat fait une plaidoirie pour la réhabilitation de l'accusé, le magistrat peut recommander que cette personne suive un programme de désintoxication et de réhabilitation dans un de ces prescribed centers et la personne est suivie par un probation officer. Il paraît, Monsieur le Président, que cela n'a pas toujours eu les résultats escomptés. Monsieur le Président, je voudrais ici saluer les efforts et l'advocacy des infatigables travailleurs sociaux et des ONG pour porter en avant les nouvelles idées, les recherches et l'ouverture d'esprit. Ce projet de loi était attendu depuis très longtemps par les ONG, je dirais même bien avant la commission d'enquête sur le trafic de drogue, compte tenu des plaidoiries des premiers centres de réhabilitation tels que le centre d'accueil de Terre-Rouge qui existe depuis 1986 et qui, depuis, accueille de nombreux usagers de drogue qui ont eu un jour la volonté de s'en sortir. Monsieur le Président, aujourd'hui, je ne viens pas apporter uniquement mon point de vue sur ce projet de loi, mais également partager avec vous ceux de quelques amis et travailleurs sociaux qui ont partagé avec moi leur lecture de ce projet de loi et émis quelques recommandations auxquelles, je suis sûre, l'honorable Dr Jagapal ne manquera pas d'y prêter attention. Avec leur permission, je vais citer leurs noms. Monsieur José Atchoun, responsable du centre d'accueil de Terre-Rouge, Dani Philippe, travailleur social, Kunal Naik, psychologue et addictologue, et Kadres Rungen, ex-officier des prisons et travailleur social. Sachez, Monsieur le Président, qu'ils sont tous en faveur de ce projet de loi. Toutefois, José Atchoun craint tout de même un revers de médaille quant au nombre d'étudiants déférés au centre d'accueil. La situation, dit-il, est alarmante. Il dit craindre de l'impunité que comprend ce projet de loi et que cela ne fasse augmenter le nombre de jeunes scolarisés qui risquent de sombrer dans l'enfer de la drogue. Selon lui, c'est un fait. La drogue dite récréative n'existe plus. Il y a maintenant toutes sortes de substances qui sont ajoutées même au cannabis. Il dit craindre également le regard des gens sur ces étudiants, pris la main dans le sac, en possession de produits illicites et qui risquent de subir une certaine exclusion dans leur milieu scolaire. Dani Philippe, travailleur social, et Kunal Naik, addictologue et psychologue, attendaient également ce projet de loi depuis 2012. Très en faveur du Drug Users Administrative Panel, ils se sont basés sur ce qui se passe ailleurs, notamment au Portugal, où la décriminalisation a été adoptée il y a une quinzaine d'années avec beaucoup de succès, avec comme résultat une baisse de consommation du taux de transmission de VIH et de violences liées aux drogues. Ils pensent cependant que le medicinal cannabis devrait avoir le recours, pour l'utilisation du medicinal cannabis, nous devrions avoir recours aussi au secteur privé. Kadres Rungen, ex-officier de prison et travailleur social qui accompagne chaque jour les parents des jeunes usagers de drogue, des femmes consommatrices de drogue et des hommes en détresse tombés dans l'enfer de la drogue et qui compte plus de 30 ans d'expérience, est favorable également à ce projet de loi. Il est aussi d'avis qu'un usager de drogue des années 80, un usager de drogue de 2022, ce sont deux types de patients et de consommateurs différents. Donc, si ces deux usagers de drogue sont différents, existant dans deux époques différentes, il est tout à fait logique que le programme de réhabilitation et d'insertion soit appelé à évoluer. Dans les années 80, Monsieur le Président, toujours selon Kadres Rungen, il n'y avait pas de jeunes de 13 à 14 ans qui consommaient de la drogue. Par contre, aujourd'hui, il y en a beaucoup. Monsieur le Président, ce projet de loi propose que lorsqu'une personne est soupçonnée d'avoir commis une infraction liée à la drogue pour sa consommation personnelle, elle ne sera pas poursuivie pour cette infraction sur recommandation du directeur des poursuites publiques, mais sera renvoyée devant le groupe administratif des consommateurs de drogue, le Drug Users Administrative Panel, le DUAP. Une fois envoyé devant le DUAP, le patient sera invité à suivre une réadaptation telle que l'éducation, le conseil, le traitement, un suivi spécifique, la réinsertion sociale et toute autre thérapie dans un établissement de santé publique ou tout autre établissement approuvé par le ministère de la Santé. Monsieur le Président, concernant le Drug Users Administrative Panel, je suggère qu'il est essentiel que ce soit un panel composé de personnes ayant à la fois de la compassion et de la compétence. Sur ce panel, s'il y a seulement des membres très compétents, mais qui n'ont pas de compassion, ce sera peine perdue, Monsieur le Président. Cette personne qui se présentera devant le DUAP devrait être accueillie comme un patient, une personne malade, et non comme un drogué, comme l'a mentionné tout à l'heure l'honorable Paul Béranger. C'est pour cela que j'insiste, Monsieur le Président, sur la compassion et la compétence. Monsieur le Président, malgré l'effort et la détermination du gouvernement, sous le leadership du Premier ministre Pravin Jugnauth, de combattre le trafic de drogue, force est de constater que la drogue synthétique est en train de détruire notre jeunesse. De plus en plus de jeunes se laissent tenter, de même que ceux qui avaient décroché, aujourd'hui se laissent tenter à nouveau avec la drogue synthétique, y replongent souvent juste parce qu'ils ont voulu y goûter par curiosité. Monsieur le Président, ce projet de loi prévoit un mécanisme afin de prévenir des abus dans ce que la loi propose. Lorsqu'à l'égard d'une infraction commise par un consommateur de drogue en vertu de l'article 34, le commissaire de police est d'avis que l'infraction a été commise par le consommateur de drogue pour sa consommation personnelle, qu'il n'existe aucune circonstance aggravante dans la commission de l'infraction et l'usager de drogue n'est pas un trafiquant de drogue, le commissaire de police peut alors recommander au DPP que l'usager de drogue soit soumis à une rééducation au lieu d'être poursuivi pour cette infraction. Lorsque, sur recommandation du commissaire de police, le DPP est convaincu que l'usager peut être réhabilité au lieu d'être poursuivi, eh bien, il peut alors conseiller au commissaire de police de le renvoyer devant le DUAP. Le commissaire de police, à son tour, sur les conseils du DPP, renvoie immédiatement la personne au panel. Cette nouvelle approche, Monsieur le Président, tranche avec les actions du passé. Ce projet de loi détournera définitivement beaucoup de consommateurs de drogue des portes de la prison et de tout ce qui peut en découler, comme par exemple la perte d'emploi, le chômage chronique, le certificat de moralité entaché, la pauvreté, la violence et les familles brisées, entre autres. Au contraire, le DUAP proposera des programmes de réadaptation qui, j'en suis persuadée, ne toucheront pas que les utilisateurs de drogue, mais aussi leurs compagnes, les maris, femmes, leurs enfants et leurs parents. Le DUAP aura une composition spécifique, néanmoins les représentants des ONG et les spécialistes du secteur privé pourront également contribuer à l'effort du panel, car celle-ci pourra coopter d'autres personnes s'ils le jugent nécessaire. Monsieur le Président, ce projet de loi a un message clair pour tous ceux qui s'adonnent au trafic de drogue ou qui pensent le faire dans un proche avenir. La justice sera sans pitié. Les amendes et peines d'emprisonnement seront revues à la hausse. Ce projet de loi, Monsieur le Président, diminuera aussi la pression sur nos prisons, car beaucoup de jeunes, beaucoup de personnes seront ainsi dirigées vers des programmes de réinsertion au lieu d'être emprisonnés. Cependant, Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de faire une petite recommandation concernant cette partie du projet de loi. Monsieur le Président, la population des consommateurs de drogue ne cesse malheureusement d'augmenter, malgré la détermination et le combat acharné du gouvernement, et ce gouvernement qui mène actuellement ce combat sur toute l'île Maurice et également à l'île Rodrigue. C'est un fait que les centres de réhabilitation et les hôpitaux, notamment l'hôpital Brunswick Ward, sont actuellement déjà engorgés. Lorsque le Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill sera voté, il y aura encore plus de personnes qui se dirigeront vers ces centres, ce qui pourrait créer une situation incontrôlable. Les hôpitaux sont nécessaires pour les cures de désintoxication, mais qu'en est-il des centres de réhabilitation? Est-ce qu'ils sont suffisamment aménagés, entretenus et équipés en ressources humaines, compte tenu que certains centres ne peuvent accueillir que 20 patients à la fois? Monsieur le Président, suite au rapport de l'ex-juge Lam Changlin, en 2018, Jean Bruno, ancien commissaire des prisons, avait suggéré de convertir la prison de Petit-Verger, le centre de détention de Petit-Verger, en un centre de réhabilitation. Planté sur plusieurs arpents de terre face à la mer, doté du programme Occupational Therapy, le centre de détention de Petit-Verger pourrait être un lieu idéal qui pourrait être converti en un centre de réhabilitation. Si un usager de drogue séjourne dans un centre où il n'y a pas de grandes activités, où il n'y a pas de grand-chose à faire, il pourrait s'ennuyer et ne reprendra pas goût au travail. Et donc, il se sentira inutile. Alors, pourquoi ne pas se tourner vers le centre de détention de Petit-Verger et le convertir en un grand centre de réhabilitation? Monsieur le Président, une chose fondamentale dans la prise en charge d'un usager de drogue, c'est la motivation. Et aujourd'hui, nous faisons face à un gros problème de motivation, surtout par rapport aux jeunes de 13-14 ans. Tant qu'un usager de drogue n'est pas la motivation qu'il faut, il sera difficile pour lui de s'en sortir. Et pour cela, il faut qu'il y ait justement ce déclic, qu'il se dise « oui, j'ai besoin d'aide ». Et c'est là que tout commence. À ce moment, il y a une prise en charge par un assessment team. Cet assessment team va évaluer son degré de motivation à travers un programme d'accompagnement. Un deuxième élément essentiel, Monsieur le Président, il s'agit de la famille et des proches. La famille a une grande responsabilité et joue un rôle important dans la motivation de ce jeune de 13-14 ans, parce que ces jeunes souffrent de ce qu'on appelle le relapse brain disease, ce qu'on traduit par la rechute. Ce jeune consommateur de drogue va probablement rechuter 2 ou 3 fois avant de pouvoir s'en sortir. Et quand il y a la rechute, cela ne veut pas nécessairement dire qu'il y a échec. Les parents, quand ils voient leur enfant rechuter, ils pensent que c'est fini. Eh bien non, ce n'est pas la fin. Et là, il est important de déterminer les causes de cette rechute. Autre point, Monsieur le Président, pour terminer, je voudrais parler des femmes consommatrices de drogue. Vous savez, Monsieur le Président, il y a une telle souffrance quand il s'agit de ces femmes. Elles souffrent beaucoup plus que les hommes. D'ailleurs, dans la plupart des cas, ces femmes tombent dans l'addiction à cause d'un partenaire, d'un mari ou d'un ami. Certaines d'entre elles sont aussi des mères. Elles sont blessées au plus profond d'elles-mêmes et sont souvent obligées de se livrer à la prostitution, ce qui n'est pas nécessairement pour les hommes. Ce qui n'est pas nécessaire, pour les hommes. Elles souffrent de préjugés, du regard des autres et sont souvent rejetées par la famille, ce qui n'est pas le cas encore pour les hommes. Sans compter qu'elles sont aussi victimes de violences, d'agressions de toutes sortes. Il y a en effet, Monsieur le Président, en ce moment une féminisation de la consommation et du trafic de drogue à Maurice. Malheureusement, il n'y a pas beaucoup de centres qui accueillent essentiellement les femmes. Je connais par exemple la case A et Chrysalide, ou alors l'autre solution, la prison. Donc il faudrait peut-être revoir cela également. Je vais terminer, Monsieur le Président, en disant quelques mots sur le cannabis médicinal. Introduire le cannabis médicinal dans la panoplie de soins de la République de Maurice est un grand pas en avant. Monsieur le Président, la qualité et la grandeur d'âme d'un pays se mesurent aussi dans la façon dont il traite ses patients. Sachant pertinemment le bien que le cannabis médicinal peut faire à nos frères et sœurs souffrant de conditions graves, nous ne pouvions pas ne pas leur permettre d'apaiser leurs souffrances. Ceci dit, il serait bon, dans un deuxième temps, Monsieur le Président, de pouvoir aussi compter sur le secteur privé. Nous connaissons tous la réalité mauricienne et les préjugés sur le service de santé publique. Ce qui risque d'arriver, c'est que nos hôpitaux seront rapidement out of stock, car même ceux qui ont les moyens de se payer le cannabis médicinal devront se tourner vers les hôpitaux, ce qui pourrait pénaliser les patients qui n'en ont pas les moyens. Le combat contre la drogue, Monsieur le Président, est un combat qui se gagne que quand vous avez la population avec vous, et c'est le cas aujourd'hui. Toute la population a été témoin pendant presque une décennie, entre 2005 et 2014, de la pourriture qui se propageait, de nos jeunes qui mouraient dans l'anonymat alors que les autorités ne faisaient quasiment pas d'arrestation, si ce n'était que pour des petits dealers de coin de rue et des consommateurs dans quelques faubourgs pour essayer de nous bluffer. Le peuple sait reconnaître un gouvernement qui means business, un gouvernement qui joint le geste à la parole, un gouvernement qui protège les enfants de l'État, un gouvernement qui investit dans sa jeunesse et un Premier ministre qui est déterminé à en finir avec l'infamie qu'est le trafic de drogue et le commerce de la mort. Monsieur le Président, pour conclure, j'aimerais, avec votre permission, m'adresser à ceux qui souffrent des méfaits de la drogue, à ceux qui dorment en prison à cause d'un poulia, aux mamans et papas qui pleurent leurs enfants partis trop tôt à cause de la drogue synthétique, aux parents victimes de violences de la part de leurs enfants à cause and dose, aux femmes prises dans l'enfer de la drogue, aux hommes qui ont démissionné de leurs responsabilités d'époux et de père, aux enfants abandonnés ou qui subissent violence, négligence et pauvreté à cause mamie et papi intom dans la drogue. Modiazut et dans l'espoir. Je m'arrête ici, Monsieur le Président, et je recommande ce projet de loi à la Chambre. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Well done, Honourable Minister-elect.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I now move for the adjournment of the debates.
Seconded. The question is that the debate be now adjourned. Those in favour say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it. Adjournment matters, Honourable British Ramphel. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I went a bit too fast. I'm sorry. Honourable DPS.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I now move for the adjournment of the Assembly to Thursday, 10th of November at 1600 hours.
Seconded. The question is that the House be adjourned to Thursday, 10th of November at 1600 hours. Those in favour say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it. Honourable Ramphel again.
Speaker, sir, I have an issue which concerns the Minister of Local Government. In fact, it concerns the operation of the incinerator at Tombo, Maibo. And that project dates back to 3 years now. And I'm told that the incinerator could not be operated previously because of some mechanical defects. Now I'm told that the incinerator is now mechanically fit to be used, but unfortunately there's no trained staff to operate the incinerator. And I'm also told by the District Council of Rosbel that on some occasions the demand for incinerator services cannot be met by the local authority because of high demands for cremation sometimes. So may I therefore request upon the Honourable Minister to kindly look into the matter so that we can have a trained staff to operate the incinerator.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker, sir, I'll talk to Grand Port District Council to try to find a solution to this problem.
Honourable Usman Mohammed.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, sir. I would like to address the Honourable Prime Minister tonight regarding a recurrent security problem inhabitants of the region of Wardcut faces year in, year out during the mango season, when those who have mango-loaded trees in their backyards receive unsolicited visits from many at times unknown persons who come and pluck their mangoes and on their behalf, and in the process they become victims of all kinds of other mishaps like theft within their homes. My request to the Honourable Prime Minister tonight is for him to request the Commissioner of Police for patrol in Wardcut for the sake of the security of the inhabitants of Wardcut. Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, I will be pleased to refer the mango preoccupation of the Honourable Gentleman to the Prime Minister.
Mangoes are taken care of. Honourable Utim.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais porter à l'attention de l'honorable vice-premier ministre et ministre des collectivités locales le problème que font face les parents des enfants qui fréquentent la garderie et école maternelle municipale à la rue Cotillon à Trangbar. Il paraît qu'il y ait un manque de personnel et que les enseignants y font la pluie et le beau temps. Plusieurs parents se sont plaints qu'à plusieurs reprises, les enseignants ont obligé les parents à récupérer leur enfant avant l'horaire normal de fin de cours, et ce souvent sans préavis. Cela, bien entendu, cause un bon nombre d'inconvénients aux parents qui n'ont plus le temps de s'organiser. De plus, les enfants de l'école maternelle n'ont plus accès au jardin d'enfants à côté de l'école, apparemment parce que les enseignants ne veulent pas devoir les superviser. Donc, je fais un appel à l'honorable ministre de reprendre toute cette question avec la municipalité de Port-Louis afin de remédier à cette situation.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll talk to municipality of Port Louis and try to find a solution for that as well.
Honourable Mahanganga Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. My request is addressed to the Honourable Minister of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change. Honourable Minister, a group of inhabitants of Mamzelzan, Goodlands, are currently facing serious inconvenience of noise and dust pollution because a 30-feet hill is currently being demolished in the region. Upon the request of these inhabitants, I visited the site. I was taken aback as there is no notice which has been displayed on the site to indicate as to who has undertaken the demolition and what development project is on the way. The numerous machines which are used for demolition, stone mining, the ceaseless to and fro of heavy goods lorries have exacerbated the situation. Obviously, these inhabitants are worried because of the serious environmental destruction which has started through this illegal activity. The inhabitants have knocked at the doors of several institutions and ministries, including yours, but in vain. I'm making an appeal to you to look into the matter. I will provide you with all information and details in that respect. I thank you in anticipation.
Thank you. Honourable Minister.
Oui, Monsieur le Président. Donc, j'ai pris bonne note de la doléance qui a été faite par l'honorable membre. Toute opération de rock quarry nécessite un permis IAE. Donc, j'ai bien pris note de l'endroit en question. Donc, je vais bien sûr informer le département concerné. À partir de demain matin, je prendrai contact avec l'honorable membre pour que les autorités puissent faire un stade de visite et voir de quoi il en retourne. Merci.
Thank you. Honourable Johanna Béranger.
Je vous remercie. Ma requête s'adresse au ministre des Arts, de la Culture et du Patrimoine. L'ancienne station de train qui se situe en face du Phoenix Mall et qui abritait tout dernièrement le Mauritius Underwater Group jusqu'à ce que les travaux du métro express ne démarrent, tombe en ruine et dépérit chaque jour un peu plus avec les travaux du métro express qui ne sont pas loin. Je lui demande de bien vouloir s'assurer que ce bâtiment, qui a une valeur patrimoniale indéniable, puisse être préservé pour éviter d'être ensuite démoli et de s'assurer aussi que le canon qui s'y situait soit aussi préservé et réinstallé par la suite. Je vous remercie.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I will relay the message to the National Heritage Fund. I am aware that there was a study conducted prior to the work being done by Metro Express, but I will surely look into the matter personally. Thank you.
Honourable Fabrice Abbott.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président. Ma requête de ce soir s'adresse également au ministre des Arts et du Patrimoine culturel. Monsieur le Vice-président, plusieurs de nos concitoyens désespérés n'ont plus d'autre moyen que la grève de la faim pour faire entendre leur voix. Après le propriétaire de Rotiaka il y a 2 semaines et les membres de collectif La Voix Rasta hier, c'est désormais Joseph Nicolas Émilien, plus connu sous son nom d'artiste Rasnati Baby, qui envisage d'entamer une grève de la faim à la mi-novembre pour, je le cite, dénoncer le laxisme du ministère des Arts et du conseil d'administration de la MASA. Et cette tragique intention Rasnati Baby l'a signifié dans un courrier en date du 31 octobre 2022, adressé au ministre des Arts ainsi qu'à la MASA, basé sur l'intenable attente depuis 9 ans de l'assistance financière prévue par la MASA Pension Scheme, ce que l'on appelle communément la pension des artistes. Puis-je demander au ministre s'il a pris connaissance de ce courrier de Rasnati Baby et quelle suite il compte y donner? Merci.
Wait, 1 second. I've allowed it, but you realize it's a request. It's a request. I still didn't get the request quite well. Prevent the strike, or has he received the courier? It's not proper. You're young, I'll let you off this time. I'm sure the Minister will gladly reply, however.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Sir, I also thank Honourable Member for having given me advance notice
it's fair.
of this query. I have taken cognizance of this letter, which has been communicated by Jean-Nicolas Emilien, and his concern. And I should say that this is a request that has been made previously, and the matter relates to the Artists' Solidarity Scheme, which was set up in 2010, and the purpose of the fund was to pay some kind of a benefit, a retirement benefit to artists who are recognized or categorized as full-fledged artists at the level of the MASA. And at that time, there were a range of criteria that was set up, that was listed, which allowed the board of MASA to identify who are those who are qualified for that benefit and who are not. And as at now, out of all the artists registered at the MASA, there are only 20 artists who benefit from this scheme, and they benefit actually from 1,000 rupees up to 2,500 rupees per month. But given that ce fonds est alimenté des recettes, des revenus collectés from the management of performance and broadcasting rights. De ce fait, to be able to sustain that account, it was a bit difficult. So, MASA a étudié deux options. Two options: either we cease to allocate this benefit, so we close the fund, or we try to find another set of criteria or conditions and to review the amount payable. Unfortunately, on a eu les élections et le nouveau board a récemment été reconstitué. They are taking up the matter, but what I'm doing is, once I took cognizance of the letter, I'm calling for a meeting with Monsieur Emilien to talk to him and to put the facts to him, parce que, comme je dis, on prend cette affaire très au sérieux. We are as much concerned with our fellow artists, with our friends artists, et ce problème-là est beaucoup plus d'ordre technique, rather than just une volonté d'aider. So I will need to put all these elements to Monsieur Emilien, but definitely we will find a way out to help him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ankechi.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Vice-président. Ma requête s'adresse au ministre de la Santé. Je sollicite le ministre afin d'obtenir des nouvelles des 2 nourrissons résidents du shelter L'Oiseau du Paradis, admis actuellement à l'hôpital SSA, qui font l'actualité en ce moment, et du bébé souffrant d'une hernie ombilicale qui a eu sa décharge de l'hôpital hier. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Vice-président.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I've received the information earlier. I've been informed that both babies, they are well, they're clinically well, and soon they will be discharged.
Honorable Adila Miamia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. The issue I'm raising tonight is addressed to the Minister of Finance. Though he is not here, I'm sure one of his colleagues can take up the matter. It's in relation to the shortage of foreign currency. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for quite some time, there is a problem, an acute shortage of foreign currency, especially for small and medium enterprises. Small and medium enterprises are having enormous difficulties to acquire foreign currencies for their importations. And if I can give one example from a business of my constituency, is a business for the importation of reconditioned cars. Someone has come to see me, he has got all the problems of the world to have some dollars to import reconditioned cars, while big companies don't have these issues. So, and I'm sure similar businesses, small and medium, they also has this problem of having foreign currency for their importations. So my appeal today to government is to take necessary measures, any necessary measures to be envisaged so as to ensure adequate supply to everyone, and especially to small and medium enterprise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Bula will take it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I will certainly talk to the Honourable Minister of Finance so that he can look into this matter urgently.
I believe nobody else wishes to put a supplementary question.